Good evening. I'd like to call to order the October 18th Planning Commission meeting. Roll call, please.
Certainly. Commissioner Guerrero?
Here.
Commissioner Hale is on leave. Commissioner Hunter?
Here.
Commissioner Schmidt? Here. Commissioner White?
Here.
Vice Chair Bondano?
Here.
And Chair Radcliffe.
Here. Thank you. Please join us as we say the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, approval of the minutes.
Move to approve.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner White and a second by Commissioner Hunter. All in favor?
Madam Chair, I will abstain as I was absent from that meeting.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Bondano. Oral communications, we have none. Consent calendar, we have none. We will go right into our public hearing, I believe. We have a presentation from staff.
Operates. Oh, is it working? No? Oh, you're on? Because I've got display off. Do you have it on yours? There we go. Just a little warmed up. Okay. Good evening. I'm going to be speaking tonight about the item on the agenda for level of review authority. We're calling this phase 3 of our zoning code amendments package. So I'm going to give a quick background on what the origin of the study issue was and the discussion that's been held so far at Council. And then I'm going to discuss sort of the 3 core amendments, which are the new review thresholds for height, call-up procedures, and zoning administrator referrals. And then as part of this amendment package, we actually did some substantial reorganization and minor amendments, and I'll go into some key aspects of that. So right now, the zoning code allows for some larger projects to be considered at a zoning administrator level. So for example, in our mixed-use corridor zoning districts, we allow multifamily uses that are permitted by right, which means when they come in, if they meet all the standards, we review them through an architectural permit. And that's just at a staff level, zoning administrator level. Similarly, in our downtown precise plan area, if you're building on a site of less than 30,000 square feet, you can also be considered just at a zoning administrator level. So for example, 550 Allerton, which is a 6-story office building, was able to be considered at the lower level, as well as 849 Veterans, which is a multifamily development. There's some concern that these are projects of height and of community significance, and that they would be more appropriately reviewed by the Planning Commission. This was discussed at the City Council hearing on February 22nd. And after discussing various methods, Council did direct staff to proceed with the amendments tonight. Just as a quick refresher, we do have 4 levels of review that are key. We have 2 zoning administrator levels. One is for no hearing, and that's for things like signs and second-story additions. And then we have zoning administrator hearings, which are things like use permits, variances, small telecommunication applications. And then usually the larger developments go to Planning Commission and City Council, depending on what the application is. I do want to note, though, that all of our public hearings have identical noticing process. So whether or not you go to ZA or City Council, we still do similar types of noticing. So one of the key amendments that we're proposing is to install a review requirement that anything exceeding 35 feet or 3 stories be reviewed by the Planning Commission. This would catch those previous projects I talked about, and we believe that would catch most of the substantial development that would be coming in. And so that would allow for a higher level of review, and the Planning Commission review does get more community attention and participation. So this would be something that would be recommended for tonight. There's 2 other items that we're also recommending. So right now, the City Council has something called a call-up procedure, where 2 individual council members have the power to request a hearing in front of council for any item in the zoning code that's been decided. And so what they discussed at their February 22nd hearing was the possibility of having Planning Commission call up items to themselves. And there was a wide range of discussion about Planning Commission calling things up, and also Planning Commission calling things up in advance of a zoning administrator decision, sort of really kind of pulling it straight up. So staff looked into that over the last few months and has actually determined that because of considerations of due process and some potential conflicts between PC and CC call-ups, we're actually recommending that the City Council call-up process be expanded so that City Council can choose to pull up items to either themselves or to Planning Commission. And we think this is a solid process that would make sense and address the concerns that were expressed about larger items and having that authority to bring them up. However, I do want to note that this would happen after a zoning administrator decision. So if something is scheduled to go to zoning administrator, it would need to go through that process first, through the set process, and then at that point, City Council would have the ability to call up either to themselves or to the Planning Commission. So lastly, this is another sort of backup mechanism, is level of review or referrals. This is common for many planning divisions to have, is the ability for a zoning administrator to just refer an item up to a higher level, and they can make that determination based on projects of community significance or any types of other issues that they think would be best served by a planning commission hearing. So when staff was looking at how we were going to make these amendments, we discovered there was some real challenges with the way the zoning ordinance was set up in terms of the current structure, where right now for the review process that is laid out individually under each and every permit article. So for our 7 or 8 permits, it's laid out 7 or 8 times. And when we were trying to figure out how to clearly communicate to the public and applicants what the process was, this would be a pretty cumbersome process. So we decided to take advantage of this opportunity and reorganize our permit articles to make it easier for the public to understand what the process is for reviewing projects, to have everything sort of in the right bucket, right next to each other, and to be more clear and standardized with how we describe our permit process. So as you can see on the left, for this is the current structure. We have all these different types of items under each individual permit article. And with the new system, we're going to have a new section called Common Procedures that will walk applicants through chronologically from application submittal all the way through to appeals and permit expiration, and how that process is reviewed and decided on. And that's consistent across permit types. And then individual permit articles will discuss the purpose of the permit, when the permit can be applied for, findings, and things that are specific to that individual permit type. So the key review authority amendments are actually in that Common Procedures chapter, and that makes it very easy for them to apply across the board. A couple other items that came up when we were doing these cleanups. In the zoning ordinance, the first article, it talks about the purpose of our zoning ordinance, and then each individual permit often has a finding that sort of relates back to it. The challenge was that they were not exactly consistent. They used different phrases for each permit type. Some discussed morals and peace. Some just discussed health and welfare. So we're standardizing that throughout the zoning ordinance to the statement on the right in green to protect the public health, safety, and welfare. A couple other items I just wanted to note. We are standardizing our process for concurrent review. This means that when we receive a whole series of different applications that could have different levels of review, all of them get batched together and go to the highest level of review. This helps make it clear for the public and for us and for the decision maker to decide on all the applicable entitlements. We standardized our review periods to make them consistent with CEQA and the Permit Streamlining Act. We are establishing an ability for the zoning administrator to make interpretations for various zoning district uses across the board. That's going to be really helpful for us. And then lastly, we're removing application requirements from the zoning code and establishing them for the director. This will give us a little bit more flexibility when sometimes we need to change our application requirements rather than doing a whole zoning code amendment, we can just make those changes. And then lastly, on the right, this is more examples of trying to clean up the language, make it more straightforward, easier for the public to read, going from the previous to the new. So we received 2 letters of support on these code amendments, and our next steps is to take this for final action to City Council on November 21st. This concludes my presentation.
Great, thank you very much. Any clarifying questions? Okay. Public hearing.
Open up the public hearing.
So I have a motion from Commissioner White and a second from Commissioner Schmidt for public hearing. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Since I have no speaker cards at this point, and I have a motion by Commissioner Schmidt and Commissioner White to close the public hearing. All in favor? Aye. Okay, great. Any discussion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So a couple of questions in regards to calling up projects and the process. So how would that go? So would the chair reach out to staff and say that's the wishes of the Planning Commission to have this called up? And would the staff then reach out to City Council? And would that be an agenda item, a consent item? How would that work?
I'll start, and then the city attorney can help me. The call-up process is structured such that it has to happen within a certain window of time after a decision has been made. So my guess is that it would not be something that would need to be formally agendized on a planning commission hearing, as there would be timing issues with that. It does need to originate from a city council member. So the discussion would have to happen, or would have to come from city council member. So it would be something that maybe a planning commission would request that unofficially of the city council, and then they could decide whether officially they wanted to make that call, to call it up to planning commission.
Okay, I'm sorry.
And so just following up on that, so there are, first of all, there are 2 points of recourse. The planning manager or the zoning administrator now has the authority to, what are we calling it?
Refer.
To refer items up that he feels warrant planning commission review rather than his review. And so that would happen before, as he's reviewing the application, before it's even heard or any decision is actually made. So the decision will then lie to the planning commission. But you also have a call-up option when a zoning administrator decision has been made and you feel, well, and I shouldn't say you, the city council, so the city generally has an option to call up an item when the city council members, 2 individually, would be making a decision that they feel like this warrants higher level of review. And so at that point, once the decision by the zoning administrator has been issued, the city council would then, within 15 days of that issuance of that decision, would have to file a call-up request to the city clerk. And that's how that would then, as long as 2 council members have done so, then the call-up has actually occurred, and it will go to the Planning Commission for their review.
Perfect.
Commissioner Hunter?
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. So I watched the video of the City Council meeting on February 22nd, actually, I think going into that meeting, staff had not recommended the call-up procedure. That was actually their proposal, and all the City Council members that spoke about the call-up procedure talked about the Planning Commission having the ability to call it up. It wasn't really a debate, Planning Commission or City Council. And it seems because this whole the whole thing that we're looking at tonight is a great idea to make more public review of projects that the public's really concerned with. It seems that if the Planning Commission had the ability to call up projects, as well as the City Council having the ability, that would double the number of people, on the 2 bodies that could bring something up if it was felt that it was in the community's interest.
Right, and I understand your comment, and actually I'm going to turn it over to Veronica because we have had a lot of staff discussion about this, and there's actually some very solid legal reasons of why we are recommending this particular process as opposed to having a planning commission call up. So.
Thank you. So you are correct that the City Council direction was for the Planning Commission to have call up, and that was originally kind of what the direction was to staff. And as city staff and legal worked on the amendments, we really struggled with that piece of it because there could be potentially conflicts as a result of both Planning Commission and City Council wanting to call it up. And really, when you think about the purpose for a call-up, it is because the legislative body is making a decision that this is something for the better good of the city. And as a result, we're recommending that it be the City Council that makes the call, and it goes to the Planning Commission for their decision. Of course, the recommendation can be different from the Planning Commission to the City Council for the City Council's final consideration. It would take some. Again, we would still be struggling with some of the conflicts that could occur, and we would have to really kind of work on that language in order to be able to present it to the City Council if that's something that the Planning Commission would like to see.
Okay, so help me out here then. I'm not sure I understand what kind of conflicts there would be. I mean, we could call it up, two of us could call it up, or two of them could call it up, and if they did, they could call it up for Planning Commission review. So what are the conflicts that you see?
The conflicts that could happen is if you could actually have three conflicts at the same time, where an appeal would be filed, a Planning Commission call-up would occur, and a City Council call-up would occur. And what trumps where, and how does that end up procedurally working out? And so what we've done in this code, the way it's written now, it provides for the City Council to have the call-up ability to the Planning Commission. And any appeals that would be filed would concurrently be happening with the Planning Commission at the same time. So the hearing would be both the call-up and the appeal, and you'd be moving forward in that respect. Now, again, if there's an interest by the Planning Commission to have the Planning Commission have that ability, that's something that can be recommended to the City Council.
You know of any other jurisdictions that have the Planning Commission ability to call up?
We found no jurisdiction with that call-up by a Planning Commission or any other appointed body. All other cities that have call-up abilities are by the legislative body that feels like they need to have that control should they find that there is a decision that needs to be made at a higher level. We also did not find any other body, any other city that actually had items called up to their appointed bodies. It usually comes up to the City Council the way the City Council has had that happen. So this is definitely something moving in the direction of making sure that some of the lower body decisions are brought up, and it provides for more process, but is definitely a new option available.
Either way, we're breaking new ground.
Yes.
Okay.
It's always a good thing.
I have a couple other smaller things later, but why don't if anybody else wants to talk about the call-up thing, because I think that may be a bigger issue.
Commissioner Bondano?
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the call-up, so I'll just go ahead. I'm fine. I'm very comfortable with the way that the resolution's been written, to the extent that that will let the City Council do the call-up versus allowing the Planning Commission to request a call-up directly. So I'm just fine with that. Ms. Ramirez, you started to talk about the appeal process, and that's something that I just didn't quite fully understand. So maybe you could give some real-world scenarios potentially. So here's one thing I thought of. Let's just say, if the item had originally been within the purview of the zoning administrator, and for the moment, whether or not it was referred up or called up, two different things, but, well, maybe that needs to be differentiated as well. So let's just say that it was with the zoning administrator, it was called up, the City Council called it up to the Planning Commission, whereby normally the Planning Commission is the body of appeal, but now it's been called up. Does that then sort of still cap the level of appeal, or after called up, a member of the public could still appeal then further up to the council? Does that make sense?
That does make sense, and definitely Ms. Odell and I worked on this piece as well, and the code is clear that that is where the decision ends and rests, and there isn't any additional appeal because, again, the due process has already been had. They had the opportunity, anybody had the opportunity to appeal along with the call-up. So both options are available. And so if someone does not appeal the lower body decision, there is no further appeal available.
Okay.
Right, and if I may, I just wanted to go back to one of your original comments and to make a differentiation between the referral process and the call-up. So referral, what happened before a decision. So that would be when the zoning administrator receives an application, takes a look at it, and goes, you know what, this would be best heard by the Planning Commission, and would immediately move that up. So the zoning administrator wouldn't be making a decision and then passing it up. They would refer up. That's the one difference. So a call-up, you have to wait for that ZA decision, and then you can bring it up.
Okay.
And then if I would walk through that scenario that Ms. Odell mentions, if it was referred up by the zoning administrator to the Planning Commission decision is actually the first decision that's being made, and so it may be appealed up to the City Council at that point. Again, all talking about what due process is available for appeal by the member of the public.
Okay. So that's very, very helpful. So that was going to be some of my other line of questioning was the timing and the gating of when any of these things could, in fact, be triggered. So let me just see if I can pare it back real quickly. So the zoning administrator may make a decision to refer it up to the Planning Commission if he or she chooses to do so. And just quickly, that basically is effectively a subjective determination. They don't necessarily have to make any hardcore explicit findings, but the zoning administrator could say, I think this should go to the Planning Commission and refer it up. And that's clearly before he or she's made a decision, because
Right.
kind of is moot if they've already made a decision after that point in time. So then, so that's one. If it's referred up, that's the first. The Planning Commission would be the first decision. So there would be the ability to appeal up to the City Council. Got it. So it really is just a matter of like who decides what first kind of scenario, and is there still an appealability after that point in time? So is it safe? I might get in trouble with, but simplistically thinking about it, if the council waits for a zoning administrator decision, they could then afterwards call it back up to the Planning Commission or themselves. But in effect, that's almost as if the council is sort of making the appeal. Well, but then there's no appeal that's allowed after that.
So again, if an item is called up by the City Council, it is not an appeal. It is distinct from an appeal. A member of the public, so again, you would have a zoning administrator decision. It would be issued, and it's a final decision if within a 15-day period it is not appealed or called up.
Right.
It may very well be called up by 2 council members, and that would effectuate the call-up, and appealed by a member of the public or more. In that case, you have both the appeal and the call-up occurring.
Okay, I got that. I just want to be perfectly clear for myself and for the public. Mm-hmm. If the council calls it up to the Planning Commission, we make a decision, that then is the final decision. There is not the ability for the public to further appeal it to the council.
That is correct. The public had an opportunity to appeal the zoning administrator decision.
So there's only one
Correct.
appeal.
There is an opportunity to appeal. It was at the same time that the council had an opportunity to call up, just like it has today.
Got it. That makes sense. Thank you. That
So
helps.
there's the opportunity for one appeal, whether it comes appealing the zoning administrator or appealing the Planning Commission. There's one appeal opportunity.
One appeal only, right.
Right.
And the only other point I want to make is that with the 35-foot height threshold, we really think that with that you are going to be seeing, it's hard to imagine what project it would be that would cause this level of community involvement that either the zoning administrator wouldn't refer or somehow. So this process is in place. It's well thought out, but we're not expecting that a lot of it's going to be used.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Hunter.
Okay, so now I'm even more confused about one thing, about appeals. So, and maybe I'm reading it wrong, or maybe it's something that should be redrafted here. But the proposed section 41.7 appeals, paragraph 8 says finality. Because I had a question on this before your statement right now. It says a decision by the Planning Commission on appeal shall become final unless appealed or called up by the council. So that says to me that it can be appealed twice.
Refer to the section.
41.7H. So that was my question even before you had just mentioned that, because I thought that it could only be appealed once.
I'm looking to Planner Odell on this one.
Right.
So I believe that is an error, but I'd like her confirmation on that because, again, a decision of the Planning Commission on appeal has always been the final decision unless called up by the City Council. That's been the case today. It's been the case for years, and it was expected to be the case moving forward. So it looks like you've caught a very important typo, and so we'll need to clean that up. But again, as it is currently today, when an item is appealed to the Planning Commission is the final decision-making body. There is no further appeal opportunity to the council. The only other option is that the council can choose to call up that appeal decision. And that's what it is today, and that's what it was intended to be kind of moving forward. This new call-up wasn't going to change the ability to appeal more times.
Okay, so I'm clear on the appeal issue right now. But following up on Commissioner Bondano's questions, so if something is called up so the zoning administrator makes a decision, then the City Council calls it up to us, we make another decision. Can the City Council then call it up again to themselves?
Yes, my understanding is they can have multiple call-ups. There's no limit on the call-ups.
That is correct.
Yes. So they can call it up, but it can't, but the appeal is limited to the one. And Commissioner Hunter, yes, I appreciate you catching that. I think that is a drafting error because it's pointing back to the municipal code, which does talk about appeals and call-ups. But for this particular aspect of the appeal process, it should only be referring to call-ups. So we'll make that change in the City Council version.
Okay, good. Maybe one other thing here too. Sorry to get too much into the weeds, but maybe it's good that we are. 41.8B, whatever that is. Oh, that's on call-ups. So that says that a, quote, appealable decision can be called up. But it sounds like that's not really the case. They can call up, because what we're saying is if the ZA and we have made a decision, it's no longer appealable, but it can still be called up. So it should be that, I guess, any decision can be called up by the City Council.
The intent of that phrase was there are some decisions that are made throughout the zoning ordinance that are an interpretation type of decision. And that wasn't intended to have a full appeal process. So what we were intending with that section was just to say that formal decisions can be called up, but as opposed to the smaller interpretations that are called for throughout the zoning ordinance. But we can take a look at that phrase and try to make it more clear.
Okay, because I think the way that people would read it now, at least I did, is that only decisions that can be appealed can also be called up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And you guys have all asked some of the pressing questions I had. So just from a practical perspective, right? So and this will actually lead to my second question. So if members of this body wanted to review a project that normally would be reviewed by a ZA, right? The way in which this body could, initiate that conversation could be talking to the ZA or talking to a council member and part of a call-up. and only one of those two ways. Correct?
Yes, if you wanted to speak with the ZA, but prior to them
Yeah,
making
prior.
a
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
decision. Right,
prior to
okay.
that. Right. Okay. So then that leads to my next question. So it does allow for a lot of discretion by the zoning administrator, right? And the term that was used is significant, right? So my question was, what standards would we apply? How do we define significance? Is it that we have? I know this is going to be a lot of discretion here, but is it size? Is it public input? Is it, how would we?
Well, I think a lot of these amendments are really about getting the community engagement and the higher level of public review. So I'm not sure it would necessarily be size, but I think it would maybe be public interest. Again, one of the challenges of this was trying to work through, what type of really significant project would happen that wouldn't automatically come to you now with these new thresholds, because we really think we cover a lot of bases with that. But the fun thing is there's always something you never thought of, right? So that's why we used a little bit more of a general term, though I think our desire with referring things up are things that are of community interest. So it wouldn't necessarily be a size threshold or a FAR or anything
So
like that.
this body, being a representation of the community, right, as well as being members of community, could help facilitate that.
Yes, it's
right?
possible
So,
we could have if we had a question about
either through community members who I know we regularly get phone calls from, could refer to planning staff, say, hey, that's a great question. Send an email or make a phone call to staff, and then again, based on community feedback and input, might rise to the level of significance. And I presume, as members of the public, we too could, in our own, citizens of Redwood City, be able to do the exact same thing.
Right.
So I guess what I'm saying is we're not absolved of responsibility there in representing the community simply because we don't have a call-up provision. So I kind of just so it's with that I'm actually very comfortable with this language in here.
Great.
Commissioner Guerrero?
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying a lot of these, the appeal and the calling up. And my question, I'm comfortable with the direction that the council has given. My question is more of, and I'm trying to understand it the way, try to understand it in this way, because we're lowering the thresholds to 3 stories or 35 feet, right, in height. So I'm just trying to get an idea of how many more projects we would see coming before council, and are we going to be able to handle that with the meetings that we have scheduled? I'm kind of like going, oh, well, today we only have one item on, but we just got the schedule for the rest of the year, and I'm sure there's a lot more coming because there's a lot of things happening in our city. So I'm just trying to get an idea, what does that look like?
Yeah, it will be an additional workload, and we were considering that. I think the 3 projects, Powerhouse, 849 Veterans, Allerton, so those are 3 additional big projects you would have seen this last year. Is there others that I think those were the big ones, but.
Yeah, those were the big ones. It's not often that we get much larger projects outside of the downtown core. It does happen, but most of the zoning districts outside of those commercial areas already have fairly restrictive height limitations. So it's rare that we would have a project outside of that downtown core, but it's possible.
Yes, that's kind of the only question that I had. Thank you.
Madam Chair, thank you. I did have one other suggestion for staff, and not necessarily for the resolution, but it would be great if staff could put together a flow chart for this. I tried drawing one out here, and I got lost. So it'd be good if, I'm just doing it here in the last 5 minutes, but it would be very good for the public to know where they can participate, at which stage, and then the differences between a call-up and a review. So I think that would be very helpful for us.
Okay.
Great idea. Commissioner Hunter?
Yeah, one last area on there's a section on interpretations, and it says it gives the director, I think that's the community service, Well, it says it gives the director interpretation authority for uses in any zoning district, as well as general interpretation authority. And then in parentheses, it says this is reworded with a broader scope.
Right.
Can you tell me what kind of a change this is? I mean, is this really just a minor tweak, or is this a meaningful expansion of authority, which maybe should have its own review?
I believe it's a minor tweak. So I'll tell you the trouble that staff struggles with is that right now the way our zoning code tables are set up for each zoning district is it'll list out the uses that could be permitted or conditionally permitted. But a lot of these uses it will be silent on. It won't say anything at all. And then a few of these districts say the zoning administrator has the ability to interpret whether a new use is similar enough to a previously listed use, but not all of them do. So it's a challenge for staff because a lot of our zoning district list of uses is quite old. We're seeing a lot of new uses. We don't have a good, easy way to sort of fit them in and make that decision. And it's been sort of a struggle for us in the last couple of years. And so what we're hoping to do with this sentence is to apply it across all the different zoning districts and give us that ability to say, yes, this use is substantially similar to this conditionally permitted use or so on, and just gives us that flexibility rather than on a case by case. Oh, a third of our zoning districts allow it, but a third don't, just because they're not consistent. So I would consider it a minor tweak of authority.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Commissioner Bondano?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Oh, I see. If Commissioner Schmidt, well, I'm ready to make a motion. So,
Well, just one question. So something that just came up as I'm listening to my colleagues here, and this is more for Mrs. Ramirez. Because we don't really have a call-up provision as a planning commission, can the planning commission be perceived reaching beyond its arm's length, whatever, to try to get something called up? And can it be perceived as something other than we really wanted to be perceived? I don't know if I'm coming across, but...
Thank you for that question, Commissioner Schmidt. So in having the city council individuals be the bodies or the individuals who actually can call up, that would be a very big policy decision that would be made, that they're the ones that have that authority and have that discretion to make those important decisions. You can always communicate to your council members as well as to staff about when you have any questions or thoughts or want to let the council members know that there was a decision made. I know that we're talking internally in staff how to make sure that the city council is aware that decisions were made so that they do have the opportunity, an actual real opportunity during the 15-day period to choose to call things up. But, right now, the way that the code is written and the way it's being proposed, you don't have any authority, and trying to persuade that would, of course, be overreaching. And the authority would stay with the city council to make that decision. And the city council members individually would also need to be very careful that they're making that decision in their own opinion because they believe this is something of public interest that deserves more scrutiny or more review.
Bondano?
thank you, Madam Chair. I'll make one or two real quick comments, and then I'll be ready to make a motion. And I think that I'm going to be making that motion and comfortable with the proposal and the resolution in front of us for a couple reasons. One would be I do like that the zoning administrator has a lot of leeway, that we've not locked it down without necessarily saying that they can only refer if certain findings are met or criteria, that they do have that latitude, which I'm hoping will be beneficial, and we find that will be helpful to everyone. And so, if anything, my comments, my advice to the zoning administrator would be to, keep a pulse on the community. I know that the zoning administrator already does, but keeping a pulse on the community's sentiment would be critical, so that he or she might in fact be able to sort of proactively refer it up to the Planning Commission when we do believe that's in the best interest of our community. And then what I'm comfortable with, the fact that we don't have the call up ourselves, that the council does. So let's just say, even without that, if the zoning administrator didn't feel it was necessary, I certainly would hope that the city council has the pulse of the community and would act accordingly and appropriately call it up either to themselves or to the planning commission as appropriate. So I don't feel like we're like missing anything or something's just not going to get done when collectively as a community we all believe that's probably the right thing to do. So I think we have all the right mechanisms in place that we do that. I would agree that we should have something very clear in the appeal arena of all of this that Commissioner Hunter rightly pointed out. There's probably some cleanup that needs to happen. So I would suggest in the motion I'm about to make that cleanup would take place before it goes to the City Council. I appreciate Commissioner White's suggestion of a flow chart, whether it's that or the timing table. And here's why. Because I would hate for any member of the public to miss out or make the wrong assumption if they would like to appeal something, thinking they'll wait for the call up to take place, then the time period expires, and then they feel like they were somehow misled or misinformed and were not able to execute the appeal process in an effective way, that the data and the code and the language was somewhat misleading and didn't allow them that particular opportunity. So with that cleanup then, I'm very comfortable then. I would like to move that we adopt Resolution 16-17 as presented in our packet, and then it gets moved on as the recommendation to City Council.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Guerrero,
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter,
Yes.
Commissioner Schmidt,
Yes.
Commissioner White,
Yes.
Vice Chair Bondano,
Yes?
Chair Radcliffe.
Yes. Motion passes. Alrighty, on to matters of commission interest.
Thank you. Earlier this week, or late last week, I sent out our list of upcoming meetings for the rest of the year. You can pretty much bank on those meetings occurring, except for December 20th, which is right before the holidays, which we do expect to cancel, as well as the first meeting in January, which would be, I believe, January 3rd. So we'll likely cancel those because of the holidays. There may be some slight shifts in the items and the specific meeting that they're held on, so we might shift the agendas slightly, but we'll keep you updated on that. But we will be expected to have both meetings in November and the first meeting in December.
Perfect.
No other updates at this time.
Did you get an email from Commissioner Hale?
Yes, did you?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay. So the announcement that Commissioner Hale will be coming back from leave starting at the December 6th Planning Commission meeting. So we'll be happy to have her back and have a full commission.
Great. Super. Any other?
Yes, if I could find the date. Maybe Ms. Odell can help me because I can't find it in my inbox. Just a quick update. As you know, I'm serving on the El Camino Real Citizens Advisory Group. And so our second meeting, because it got changed, and so if I quote the wrong date, I apologize. But I believe we're confirmed to have our next meeting on Thursday, November 10th. Yeah, okay, because there was a date that not everyone could meet. So anyway, nothing to report because the meeting hasn't happened yet, but heads up that's the next meeting will be November 10th, and so hopefully I should have some good things to report after that.
Great, and we greatly appreciate you being our representative for that. So thank you. Okay, motion to adjourn. Commissioner White and Schmidt, not sure what order. All in favor? Aye. All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you.